Hey there gamers, welcome back to the Board Game Co channel, and today we have a preview of Legions of Kadmon. Hey there gamers, it's Professor Meg here, and welcome back to the Board Game Co channel. Today we have a preview of Legions of Kadmon. Now this is a current Kickstarter campaign, so you can check out the link down below for everything that they have planned. This is a sponsored video, and this is also a prototype copy in front of me, so all rules, components, and things like that are subject to change, and if you'd like to see exactly how this game plays, there's also going to be a gameplay on the channel between Alex and I, so you can see a 2-player gameplay. Now, Legions of Kadmon is made for 2 to 4 players, but you can check that out if you'd like to see a little bit more about how it all plays out, especially with how the cards interact with each other, because it can be very, very strategic. Now, Legions of Kadmon is going to be a boss battler, where players are facing off against these legions of enemies, and as you start taking them out, they become cards in your hand. So it's very unique that as you start taking out these different units, you get to almost be a necromancer and have them in your hand to be able to play into your own vassal in the future. So that's going to be one piece of the game, but the major piece is that you're trying to take out these different sovereigns. Now, the sovereigns are going to give you Ichor, and when you gain that, that's going to be points for you at the end of the game, but also gaining those cards when you're able to be the one to take the last Ichor and gain that sovereign card is going to give you a bit of a special ability, because those cards are a little bit better than the other cards that you're going to be gaining throughout the game. So that's going to be the major things that you're focusing on, but at the end of the day, when the end game is triggered either by the wilds being emptied, which I do think is more rare, but you can also have it triggered if Kadmon is unveiled. He's going to start the end game trigger for the final phase of finding the final sovereign, and then that will be the end of the game. You'll see who has the most Ichor and see who wins. Now, in front of you, you have a game that is set up for 2 players. So I have a player board on each side, which I will go over those in a moment, but you also have the general play area here, where this board is going to have a lot of information that all players are going to be interacting with. So it does have all of our actions up at the top, which I will go over, but here is our wilds deck, and those are going to be the cards that are coming out into your legion that you're going to have to fight off against. And then here's the grave, where when you cast spells, those cards will go into the grave, and there are cards that are going to be able to access that area as well. So you're going to be able to have certain actions that will let you draw cards from the grave, either at random, or sometimes you're able to look for a specific type of card as well. Now, in the center here in the crown, we have our sovereign cards. So we have 5 sovereign cards with 1 currently flipped up. The first round of the game, you don't have this flipped up, so this would be set up for the second round of the game. And when you do so, once they are revealed, you're going to place out Ichor, depending on the number here, plus the number of players. So this one is a 0 and 2 players, so you would place the 2 out. And then when they are in the Legion area, it has an immediate ability. The fragment becomes ethereal until midnight, meaning that for the first round that it's in play, until midnight, it is not able to take combat damage, which is what ethereal means. It could take spell damage or other types of damage, but not combat damage. And then units in the Legion are immune to spells, which means units in the Legion here, meaning that you aren't able to use spells against them, and ambush with 2 units, which when you are ambushing during this phase, that's how many cards you're drawing out into your Legion. So this one would have you draw 2 instead of the typical 1. And then players have a special ability, which is Invoke, using this token here, to resurrect 1 unit of a chosen type. So that's going to allow them to choose a certain type from the graveyard, resurrect it, put it into play in their vassal, but they aren't able to choose, specifically which card, just what type they might want to have. Now, as you can see here, this sovereign is 3 types, where typically normal cards are only going to be 1 type, and there are 4 types available. I'll get into why that's really important later, but there are going to be 4 different types of the units that you'll see throughout the game. So as you can see, this sovereign is here, and players are going to be going through their different actions, trying to do as much as they're able to before the combat phase to try to take some of this Ichor. So before I go through the different phases of the game, I'm going to go over the player boards quickly so that you understand a little bit more about the game. So taking a look at your player board here, you have your collected Ichor, which is very easy and straightforward, that as soon as you start collecting any from this center cup here, you're going to place it here, and some things are going to have you pay Ichor from this as well, so you are able to lose points in that sense, so you will have them over here. Now, there's also a interesting ability called Despair, where certain things will trigger and be better for you if you're behind. So if an opponent had more Ichor than you, you are able to use those Despair abilities, which can be pretty cool. Now, looking here, these are all of the actions that you're going to have available to you to do during the action phase of the game. So you're able to summon units from your hand, and you could spend 1 token to summon 1 unit into your vassal area. You're also able to spend 1 to cast, meaning that you're able to cast spells. But when that happens, the cards that are in both your starting hand as well as the units that you're going to gain are going to have casting abilities, but when you do that, they go to the grave. So you're able to use them for a spell, but if you do so, they can no longer be something that you can summon to your vassal later. Now, there's also Invoke, which I did note there's a reason why you might have the Invoke used, but other things will trigger that as well. I'll get to that in just a moment, but Invoke is going to be something that's a little bit more specialized to activate specific abilities. Now, throughout the game, when you're having combat, as I said, you're drawing cards from the wilds into your Legion, and these are bad guys. Your Legion means that's your play area to be fighting against. So anything in the Legion you are fighting, and you're going to have cards played into your vassal area that will be fighting against them. So you'll have them in play during that combat round, but one of the reasons why you're choosing specific vassals to have in play, not only are they going to have specific stats, such as 3 attack and 1 health, but they also have that unit type. And normally you have a limit to only 3 cards here in your vassal, but once you have 3 of the same type, you're able to activate these special abilities, which can be pretty cool. So for example, with the undead, your maximum vassal becomes 5 instead. So as soon as you have 3 undead here in your vassal, you can actually have more units, but if you lose any of your undead and you go under that 3, you do lose this ability, which can be really tricky. Now, the spirit one means that you can have an extra cast token over here, and your vassals are ethereal, which can be really, really great. But again, as soon as you lose 1 spirit, that is gone. Now, there's also horror, which is where you're going to use some of those invoke tokens. So you're going to gain an extra invoke token, and you're also able to use them for these abilities here, such as Ungrave 2, deal 1 damage to any unit, remove 1 damage from any unit. And then finally, there's the Samuel type. They are more rare. There are not any of these in your starting hand, but if you ever have 3 of them in play in your vassal area, you will win the game immediately. So that is a way for you to come in and win, but players are also able to target your vassal area with different spells and effects, so you can't really count for that to be the safest bet, but it's definitely something very cool that can happen if you're able to do so. So now that you understand a bit more about the game, I'll go through the different phases and what you'll actually be doing on all of your turns, because this first player marker is going to pass, so you're going to have different turns being able to be the first player, and I'll show you the general pace of play of what the rounds are going to look like, and then I'll explain when game end is going to trigger and how many rounds you can expect to play. So starting off is the Dawn phase, and that's mostly going to trigger anything with a Dawn ability. Some of these sovereigns are going to have Dawn abilities for you, and this is also when you're going to refresh your tokens, because when you use them, for example, if you summon someone, you would then flip this over. So during the Dawn phase is when players get to flip these all back and have their actions available to them again. And another thing to note is at the beginning of the game on the first turn, you do not have a sovereign available. There is no Ichor available. So during the first Dawn on the second round, that is when this would be unveiled and players would have this to see and know what sovereign they're fighting against. Now, after that is going to be the ambush, and ambush is when cards are drawn here from the wilds and put into the Legion. Now, I did already do that, although I believe for this one, the ambush was 2 units, so we should put 2 units out. So, yeah, some of these will affect how many will be put out in that ambush, but typically, if not, you'll be putting out 1 card for the ambush into each player's Legion area. Now, players are going to have to try to deal with these different cards, but I'll explain when we get to combat why it's going to be really interesting, because you may want to leave them there to fight against as well. So now after that is the action phase, where you'll go in player turn order. So if we were first player over here, we would be able to spend a token to, again, summon another card from our hand. We would be able to cast any spells if we wanted to that perhaps might do some damage somewhere. And if we were to do it, then we would put this card, this one's a basic unit, it would have done a damage somewhere. And then you can put it into the grave once you do so. And then the invoke, again, could be abilities that are here on the sovereign, or it could be if you've unlocked the horror, or if you have any sovereigns that you've played into your play area, you're going to be able to use that as well. So now let's go on to the combat, because that's going to be very interesting in this game. So when you are doing the combat, you are going to go in player order, but it's going to be simultaneous between the Legion and the Vassals. So here you can see with this, it would be doing 5 damage if I hadn't taken any of these out. This one is only 1 health, so for the sake of casting a spell, we could say that I took this one out, and now this is what our combat would look like. There's 2 damage and 2 health, and I have a total of 4 damage here and 4 health. So this one is going to do its 2 damage. I can have it do damage over here to our dead crawlers. And then for our 4 damage, we're going to do 2 here, meaning that this card is going to go into our hand, because remember, any cards that we're able to take out, we're going to add into our hand. And then after that, we have 2 additional damage. So with that damage that we're able to spread over, we're actually able to take these 2 icons. Now, if there had been more, we would only have taken the 2, but because we are taking the 2, this would actually, it would go over here, and then it would interrupt the current combat phase, where this would be resolved before it would be the next player's combat phase. So this card would go to your hand. The last player to take the last, the player to take the last Ichor is going to be the one to gain this sovereign into their hand, and then after that, the next sovereign would come out. So, for example, here we have Verdant 7, the Proud, and it says Verdant deals 1 damage to all units, then it becomes midnight. So it would have killed this unit as well as this unit. It would have done some damage over here, but then it would have immediately become midnight, skipping the combat phase for this player. So you can see where that's very interesting. And then it also has an ability that during the dawn phase, players with the most vassals sacrifice 1 of their damaged vassals, but then after that, damaged units deal double damage. So that's pretty cool, where it kind of has you does something a little bit strong as well, but you can see it really hits players with a lot of damage as well. And then if a combat round were to go normal, after that would be the midnight phase. Now, this is when certain things might trigger, such as certain abilities that are on the sovereigns. And this is also when the first player token would pass, and players also have a hand limit of 5, and during midnight is when you would discard down to that hand limit. Now, there's also something about death, where if you have no one in your vassal, you would be able to draw from the grave up to your hand size and lose some Ichor. So that is going to happen if you have no vassals at all, which is going to be pretty bad for players if you don't have that. But another thing to note is that if my vassal had looked like this at the beginning of the combat phase, and if I did not have anything in my Legion, I'm not able to do that damage over to the Sovereign. So it is very tricky of a balance that you have to have at least 1 card here in your Legion to fight against, to be able to fight that Sovereign and get that additional damage over there. Now, something that can be a little bit sneaky is that there's also quick cast. So on your turn, you can spend your tokens, but you can also cast on other players' turns if your card has a quick cast ability. And here you can see this says quick cast, deal 1 damage to a target unit. So you could choose to take out units even in another player's Legion so that they aren't able to have a combat phase that round if all they had was 1 card in their Legion with 1 health. So you can see where there are so many layers to what you want to do, and how you're not only going to be affecting your own Legion and vassals that you're very much going to be focused on, but you're also going to be looking around at what other players have available to them as well. And the most important thing is going to be that Ichor that's here. So another thing that would have happened that I didn't do is this one is a 5 and the 2 players. So 7 Ichor when this guy comes out would be placed out here, meaning that he has quite a bit for players to come and try to grab from that central area. Now, the final boss that you're going to fight against is Kadmon, and he does provide a whole lot of Ichor. He does a lot. There's a whole lot going on. He definitely feels like a final boss, but he does provide this not only to, in the beginning he provides some, but he also provides them to the one that is able to slay him at the end. So that is just another layer to the game, and when you set this up, there are a whole bunch of sovereigns that you are able to play with. So this one is you specifically play with 2 cards, Kadmon and a second card, and then after that you can shuffle in any 3 random sovereigns that you want to play with. There are a whole bunch that you're able to add in and choose from, so that's going to add different levels of complexity to the game depending on which ones you have in play and what they're going to provide. Sometimes you're going to have a ton of Ichor to work with and the scores are going to be very high, but sometimes you might have some sovereigns that are pretty low Ichor, and then it's going to be very, very close at the end end of the game. Overall, the general pace of play of the game is going to be racing toward that Ichor. So you're going to go round over round. The first player is going to change over. That will change some of those decisions that you have, because you do have those quick spells that you're able to play that will interrupt different things, and that can be very, very clever. But there are also some things that can't be affected by spells, or ethereal that can't take combat damage, so you're going to want to use things that are also very quirky and unique, such as certain abilities. For example, having the horror ability can be a way for you to get extra damage out on the board. So you're really going to be using everything that you have at your disposal, and because your vassal is easy come, easy go, you're able to take out units and draw cards and play them and summon them, but then they're also dying because they're being attacked and taking all of this damage. You can constantly pivot your plan as well, that sometimes you may have a set of 3 of a certain unit type, and then later you might have 3 of a different one because you're building up towards something differently instead. So you are going through this arc of all of these different sovereigns coming out, having them provide a ton of that Ichor for you, trying to scrabble and grab as much as you can before anyone else does. But if you're the one to slay the different sovereigns, that can be the most important, because then you're the one taking that card as well, and those cards are very, very cool when you're using them as a player. They're going to provide special abilities for you. They also have their own stats, and they have multiple tag types. So when you're working toward that unit type for the special abilities that you're gaining, having those in play is going to be absolutely important, and you can only ever have one in play. So that's also a way to kind of keep you in check in that sense as well. So that's going to be a preview for Legions of Kadmon. If you'd like to see exactly how this game plays, as I said, there will be a gameplay on the channel, so you can check that out. There is a campaign link down below for you as well. I've been Professor Meg. Thank you all for watching the Board Game Co channel, and I'll see you next time. Bye!